Oh man, Dance Macabre again. Seriously, game. All right. I don't have the best of luck with this. I'm gonna go with the Amazon because I like free shipping.
This guy. This guy right here. Gotta go with my Sage, man.
Sage is nice. They're gonna take the assassin. That's just automatic. Although that is kind of like putting a big bullseye on yourself in a way.
Oh yeah, because we know that we want to kill him immediately now.
Yeah, you're pretty much begging for death. All right. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have any extra points to do anything with him, so kind of moot. Actually, both of those cards were kind of moot because the alignment wasn't. My alignment didn't allow me to be affected either way. So just a quick refresher on the Amazon. You roll 2 dice for your movement. If you're defeated in battle or have a standoff, you can immediately refight the battle with the same circumstances, but then you have to accept the result.
And with the Sage, I can have a spell if I do not have one at the beginning of my turn, as well as being able to look at face-up cards and or the next cards on top of the decks. Correction. And oh, and I could re-roll my move without the cost of fate.
Which is nice.
Yes. because I executed both of those. The 1-2 punch.
I've definitely been enjoying playing as these new characters that come with the dungeon expansion. I think they're pretty good. They're pretty solid. Um, I've really liked most of the expansion characters that I've played, like all the way back from the Reaper and the Frostmark expansions as well. Like I feel like they've done a good job of making new characters for this game that fit the existing rules that are still unique and interesting versus the other characters that are available.
I have not been able to really see a whole lot from them, honestly, because I don't have the. Me personally, I don't have the dungeon expansion yet. I haven't picked it up.
Oh, right. So you're only seeing this stuff when you're playing with me. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think actually all three of the main expansion packs, like the Reaper, Frost March, and the Dungeon, are all pretty worth it. Like I feel like they're all pretty worthwhile and bring a lot to the game and add a lot to the game that makes it just better overall.
All the yeah, I was just gonna kind of agree with you on that one, as all the expansions so far have added ample content, whether it be the characters or just the insane cards that you encounter with, especially something like the Reaper one, the Reaper deck.
Yeah. Well, I feel like one of the things I've really grown to appreciate a lot from the dungeon expansion is just having more board to work with. You know, having a place. Oh man, not cool. I almost want to re-roll that just to keep it on the board. Crap. Ah, game. Seriously? Of course. Of course you keep that one. Lame.
Yeah, the one no one wants.
I tried to do the community service there. I tried to roll the fate and make it happen, but it was just not having it. But as I was saying, I definitely appreciate having that extra part of the board to go like play in. So, you know, because I feel like sometimes when you just have the main board to work with, you get a little bit like bunched up on top of each other in a four-player game, where it's like you're kind of always either encountering someone or you're trying to avoid encountering them. But like having those extra squares to go on to, like definitely gives you some wiggle room where you can kind of go and play almost by yourself a little bit and like avoid some of the chaos that's happening on the main board. Wow. I can't believe both of those got drawn that early.
Yeah, the strength. Sheesh, the strength and the craft one. They're just
Hmm.
rolling out.
But at least the earthquake's gone.
And the sea is safe.
Man, that's two double ones now for me on my move. It's gonna be one of those games.
Hopefully your luck
Oh,
turns.
man, that would be kind of jerky if I sent death after. Not gonna do that. It's a little early to be sicking death on people. Besides
Yeah,
that, my luck, they just roll a 5 and send it back after me.
even if it is the AI, you gotta show some mercy. It's karma.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, although I just remembered it's Dance Macabre, so actually I'd have to roll a 6 just to send it to somebody else. That's probably the biggest, like, knife twist of this whole Dance Macabre ending is like you can't even benefit from death. Like the most you can hope for is that you can just send it after somebody else.
Death really isn't your friend. I mean, he is in the base game until you get Dance Macabre. Then you're kind of in his crosshairs at all times.
Aw, sweet. I like spells.
Damn you.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Don't look at my stream, Blue Orthodox.
I'm not gonna.
Click, 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 click.
Damn it, I missed. Now I have to watch the. Gonna have to watch the playback.
Nice. All right, so I think we're off to a pretty good start here. We've got our kind of vibe going. We know what we're doing. We're making our moves and taking our turns. We could probably safely get into another conversational topic. So, do you want to start with the elephant in the room?
You can have the pleasures.
Okay. So one thing I've been trying to focus on or think about in terms of how we do this show is kind of what we focus on as far as our conversational topics go. And I think the conclusion that I've come to regarding that is that I like the idea of spending the majority of our time talking about games that we're actually playing, obviously other than Talisman. So the big game that I know both of us have been playing the past several days has been the new Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which is just crazy for me to say out loud because I have not played a Call of Duty game since Modern Warfare 2.
And me, I'm a little bit more of an avid player. I played probably all the way up until Black Ops 2. I'd be comfortable saying that. Um, but I mean, I'm definitely one of those people that were a fan of what Modern Warfare, the original Modern Warfare did, Call of Duty 4. I think that was the one everybody liked. And then, at this point, there were like subgroups of fans of all the different versions that kind of came out now. So, Modern Warfare 2 and World at War, which came right after Call of Duty 4.
Yeah, I think that's
And
right.
yeah, and me, I liked World at War. I thought honestly that was probably the last good Call of Duty game that I had played. Like I really liked the campaign. The campaign for it was solid, and the multiplayer was really fun. I think just the way that they kind of set up the attachments and the gunplay for that one was really accurate. Like it felt like you were actually shooting at each other in a World War II setting. So I really appreciated what they did with that one. And I'm happy to say, honestly, because I was really starting to take a more serious look at Advanced Warfare, just based upon some of the things that Shotter had, or VT had sent my way. Slip.
Hmm.
Uh, and um, it looked interesting, and so now playing it, now having played it, I should say, I can actually report and say that yes, it is in fact a very very fun game. At least the multiplayer so far. I think just some of the cues that they've taken from other games, and I really think for them it was a real kind of embracing itself moment for this franchise, because I felt like for the longest time it was really stretching itself, trying to be like this, like it was trying to be this realistic military shooter, but it had like really Twitch shooter mechanics and kind of just the way that the maps and the way that the gameplay fundamentals were really kind of set up. And so I think the fact that it with Advanced Warfare they really embraced that sort of just arena style shooter, just with like, I guess realistic or modern sort of, what would you even say, like weaponry. I think they've
Hmm.
finally just found that kind of combination that like really is what Call of Duty has been kind of all along, really. Because it was never like Battlefield, which I think VT could definitely get into that, kind of his thoughts on the whole COD versus Battlefield sort of conundrum we had seen over these past few years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I myself was a huge Battlefield player, huge Battlefield fan, going all the way back to Battlefield 2. I didn't play so much 1942 and Vietnam and stuff like that, but starting with Battlefield 2 in particular, I really got pretty heavily, deeply into that series, and especially games like Bad Company 2 on PC. I think may actually be my favorite of the Battlefield games because that was where they first introduced like the frostbite destructibility stuff, but it was still pretty much fundamentally a Battlefield game. It just like brought all that new technology to the table, and actually even playing things like Battlefield 1943 on PS3, I thought was a very enjoyable, like satisfying experience. But I think the thing about Battlefield is it always had this premise of, yeah, a degree of realism, right? It was always trying to kind of portray a quasi-realistic battlefield experience, obviously still being in the context of a video game. But I mean, there were certain things like the way the movement felt in those games, the way the level design was done, based on very largely on real world locations. Um, just this real sense of like grounded, almost like uh, methodical kind of devotion to that concept of just a simulated battlefield. And the thing where there was kind of always a cognitive disconnect for me with Call of Duty, especially after Call of Duty 4, sort of for that point forward, was the whole idea of the modern military aesthetic clashing with the movement mechanics and the general like arcadey Twitch arena shooter gameplay, right? Because like I would never say that Call of Duty 4 wasn't a fun, good engaging game, but there was always this weird like break point in my mind playing that game where like because it was men in military uniforms running around, something about the way the movement in that game worked, especially like in a multiplayer context where you had people like bunny hopping and porpoising and all this stuff, like it really was just a turnoff to me. And I guess a lot of what it comes down to is just like that clash between the visual aesthetic and the gameplay mechanics. And so for a long time there, like Battlefield kind of became my game, where it's like, okay, if I'm going to play like a military themed shooter, I want to play something that has, a closer to realistic kind of look and feel and gameplay mechanics. And so that kind of put me into that mindset. Um, and so I went on like that for quite a while, for years, just kind of playing the next Battlefield game every time it came out and really enjoying that, and kind of like just drifted further and further away from Call of Duty, um, until Battlefield 3, which was, where they made a bunch of fundamental changes to the series that I really didn't care for, not the least of which being the fact that if you wanted to play it on PC, you had to play through Origin, which was dumb because all my friends are on Steam and all my other games are on Steam, so why can't I play Battlefield 3 on Steam? But that's a whole nother discussion. And then things like, the web-based launcher to get into games, like not having a proper server browser in the game itself, not having dedicated server options, on and on and on. And that kind of really started to erode my sort of faith in DICE as a developer and EA as a publisher and Battlefield as a series. And then when Battlefield 4 finally came around and none of those issues got addressed, and you had a game that, from a technical standpoint was very impressive, but also suffered from a ton of issues, not the least of which being like performance and connectivity and networking issues. I felt like that was kind of the final straw for me, where I'm like, you know what, I need to step away from this series until EA and DICE and all concerned can get their act together. And so it was, conveniently right around that time that I started hearing about Advanced Warfare and kind of what Sledgehammer was doing with that game. And I feel like like you said before, the thing that is great about Advanced Warfare as a game is that it really embraces those core Call of Duty mechanics and puts them into a setting where they're way more acceptable and easier to relate to mentally. Like this whole idea of it's the future, you have this exoskeleton with booster rockets on it that lets you move around in the way that you're, in this really crazy, intense arcadey style way. It all like it all adds up and fits together in a way that I feel like the previous Call of Duty games just didn't. Like that disconnect now is gone for me, and I find that I can enjoy that game a lot more now as a result.
Yeah, yeah. It's just again, it embraced what it really always was, instead of just constantly. Because again, that one of the reasons why I stopped playing was because, not only had I played, God, five, six of, variations of it already, but at the same time, it was just law of diminishing returns when they were still constantly trying to do that formula when the game itself really just wasn't there anymore. you know, that's when I ultimately had to step away until this one comes along, and they they did a lot. Because even, because that's just honestly one of the good things that they did with this Call of Duty, was really just kind of embracing what it's been all along. But I think another kind of plus side to it too was that it's also borrowed from other games of its in its genre as well, to kind of make it that much better, such as the supply drops. It kind of reminds me in a way of, like, with Counter Strike Go, to be specific, and kind of the sort of what is it? They have the crates where you have to buy the keys and unlock them, and then you get a weapon. In
Mm-hmm.
Call of Duty, you get these supply crates basically just from playing the game. Whether it doesn't matter how well you do, it doesn't matter, about any of that. Um, and you just kind of get these supply drops. And when you open these supply drops, you get two or three items, and they are kind of color coded, the whole rarity thing, from like enlisted, professional, and elite, I believe, are the three that they have now. I'm not sure what their plans are for that in the future with DLC content and all that, but that'll be interesting to see, which is why I'm still trying to contemplate whether or not I want to get the season pass, uh, as whether or not the kind of loot that they put into the game. But I thought that was a really cool thing. I mean, especially since, on top of that, you don't have to pay anything extra like with CS:GO. But I mean, I just thought it was an interesting way, really, to take it to that next step and be like, hey, what if you get these supply drops and now you get things like clothes and weapons out of this, box that you get really just from playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Any game mode, anytime, nothing too specific, just go and play. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think you could very easily make a checklist of a lot of the features in Advanced Warfare and say, oh, these movement mechanics are similar to, the pilot movement mechanics in Titanfall, or these, unlock mechanics are similar to this game, or this, level design is similar to that game. But I think, like, ultimately, what it boils down to for me looking at that game is the total package, right? And this is something that I found myself saying over and over again these past couple days as I've been playing that game. It's it's very refreshing to play a game that just feels polished and done and feature complete, because I feel like it's been, for me personally, quite a while since I've played a game that felt that way right out of the box, the way this one does. And I think that's something really important and noteworthy, especially in this day and age where like so many games ship like half complete and broken, how like good and polished and technically competent this game actually is.
oh yes, yeah. I mean, God, and actually, good segue. um, with the regards to you know all the kind of flurry of early access games that we've had. I think just Steam has had in general, and just kind of the amount of unfinished games, as opposed to the amount of, again, feature complete. You buy it and you can play it, for 4 hours without having, to be interrupted by whatever it is, bugs, the game crashes all the time, anything like that. And again, Call of Duty is definitely, one of those just feature complete, pick it up, play it type of, experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And to its credit, I mean, it really always has been. It's just, again, it was really just the quality of you know, the quality of that time that you were getting anymore. You could
Well,
always kind of rely on them.
I do feel like though, especially on PC, there's been kind of a hit and miss track record with Call of Duty games. Like especially with regard to things like network performance and hacking and cheating and stuff like that in multiplayer. I don't feel like their record has been like completely unblemished. So I do think it's noteworthy to point out the fact that there hasn't been very many signs of issue with the game that I've seen in any of those regards. Like we've seen a bit of latency, here and there playing in multiplayer over the past few days, but certainly nothing like crushing, and certainly nothing that's been like prolonged, right? Like you might get a few rounds that are like that, but then eventually it kind of smooths out or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and that's really always been, something at least from what I remember, always kind of a running thing with that game
Hmm.
was the just the awful connectivity because most of the time, and I still think they do, is they would just go off of other people's internet connections, which isn't always the best thing for obvious reasons.
Yeah, when I think that is a bit of a question or a bit of a concern in even in Advanced Warfare is they seem to be relying pretty heavily on peer-to-peer connections as opposed to dedicated servers, um, which is I always think is kind of a mistake, especially on the PC side of things when where dedicated servers are so almost expected from top level high end shooters or even like even most indie shooters, these days will ship with a dedicated server of some sort. Um, so I'm a little bit concerned by that. Although I will say, playing the game the past couple of days, I have definitely had, a pretty positive experience with it. So, it hasn't been like I've been grinding my teeth wishing for dedicated servers because I'm having such a terrible time or whatever. It's been more like, oh, this maybe isn't perfect all the time, and I bet a dedicated server would address that. But also, I'm having a good time and not really too annoyed by it.
Yeah, yeah. True, true, true. Oh,
Man, what a bummer.
after such a good roll too.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was pretty excited when I rolled that six. And I thought, man, I'm gonna get this thing. But no. Nope. But yeah, so I guess the other thing, I mean, I feel like there's like a million things we could talk about the whole Call of Duty thing, but I guess the one thing in particular I wanted to talk about because it's what I've been doing. One of the things I've been doing with it the past couple of days is actually playing the campaign. Um, and I have to say, those first three or four missions that I've played so far, pretty good, pretty satisfying, pretty entertaining, pretty well done. Uh, Play the game on PC if you can, because Kevin Spacey's eyes look way less like dead doll eyes on PC. But I mean, it's an impressive game, like from a technical standpoint, like especially in the campaign. Like you're gonna, I mean, and I would say again, that's probably par for the course for the series, but there's definitely like visual effects and cool little like one-off mechanics and stuff that are happening in that campaign that you're not going to see necessarily reflected in multiplayer. Like playing the campaign has definitely given me an appreciation for some of the abilities and things that you can do in multiplayer that I maybe wasn't as aware of before playing the campaign. So in that regard, there's some tie-in and crossover. But I think even just taken in and of itself, like even if you're not really too into the multiplayer aspect of that game for whatever reason. Like, I think the campaign, from what I've seen of it so far, is pretty solid, and I'd say I'm about like two, maybe 2.5 hours into it, and it's been pretty entertaining so far.
Nice. Because I have not gotten a chance to play it yet. So.
It's definitely one of those situations. Like, I feel like a lot of times when I play a game, campaign, I feel like I'm struggling to get through it, and I'm not really, like, it almost feels like work sometimes in a lot of modern games, and I feel as though this game, it really is just pleasant, and I kind of am looking forward to, doing the next thing or the next mission. Like when I was working today, that was definitely one of the thoughts that kept popping into my head was, like, oh, it'd be cool if I could do another campaign mission tonight. And that is not a thought that occurs to me, very often these days when I think about games in a single player context, like actually wanting to play the single player. That's not something that happens for me a lot recently. So definitely felt like that was noteworthy.
I mean, absolutely. Especially since, whoops. Especially given how, awesome like the old game was, or Call of Duty 4's campaign was, because everybody always talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really did love the campaign from that first game, and so it's good to hear that they're not just kind of you know just putting together a single player campaign for the sake of having a single player campaign.
No, they're definitely putting some effort in. I would say, like unless things completely fall apart, after the fourth mission, which is certainly a possibility. Like I said, I've only played the first four, but I mean, what I've played has been really solid and enjoyable and well put together and just engaging. So that's, I mean, they're off to a good start, if nothing else. There's definitely, I think I described it the other night or last night as like some holy shit moments in that game, where in the single player, where you're like, wow, this is like really pretty neat and pretty impressive. And like, it's, again, like playing as many games as I do and having, seen as much stuff in games as I have, like it's harder and harder for that to happen for me. So the fact that like that can happen still is kind of neat.
It's a nice thought to still have developers and games out there that get it.
Hmm. But so I guess the other, I kind of don't want to go too much longer on the COD talk, but I feel like I've been enjoying it so much and I've been playing so much of it. I kind of want to, uh, you know, give it its due, and really talk about it thoroughly. But I mean, the one of the things I wanted to mention is there's definitely some cool stuff in the multiplayer, even like beyond maybe what you would typically expect. Like there's a new mode which I think is kind of cool, that uplink mode that we played a little bit of. Um, like even though we didn't do particularly well at it, I still think it's a cool idea. Like what were your thoughts on that?
Oh, what? All their different game modes.
Yeah, I mean, or even just the uplink mode in particular, like the one where you have to go get the satellite thing and throw it into the goal. Like I thought that was kind of a neat idea. Like even though it's pretty tough to do well at it.
Yeah, that's for sure. God damn it. Sorry about that. I got distracted with trying to
No, it's all right.
get something.
For those of you watching, this is the problem with doing a show like this is you're great at talking, everything's fine, and then your turn comes up, or like you draw a card that you haven't seen before, or something like unexpected happens, and it completely like derails your brain. Because like Talisman's kind of one of those games you can sort of go on autopilot a little bit, like especially the more familiar you are with the cards and everything. But then, like every once in a while, it'll just break your mind, like unexpectedly.
And that was a cause. That was definitely a case of that right there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, they've put some. Also, they've put some modern spins on like some old classic modes that were in the game. Like I was playing a lot of Hardpoint today, which is basically, if you've played the previous Call of Duties, there used to be this game mode called Headquarters, which I was a huge fan of, and Hardpoint quarters just without the capturing phase. Like, it's basically just like it's almost like now it reminds me a whole lot of like almost like Gears of War's King of the Hill mode, whereas basically like you just go and you just have to like hold a point down,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd like gain points for having for being in the territory or whatever. And Hardpoint is much like that, but it reminds me of a lot of Headquarters. But yeah, Uplink was all right. Again, we getting just absolutely smashed. I didn't really get to see all the intricate ins and outs, if there were any, of that mode. But I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed what they were kind of going for.
I just kind of like the idea of like mixing like a sporting event, like almost like it's like soccer with bullets or something is how I would describe it, right? Because it's basically like the satellite thing is a ball, right? And when you're holding the ball, you can't fire your gun. You can throw the ball at somebody else and have them catch it and shoot them, but you can't actually do anything but carry the ball and throw it when you have it. So basically, you're relying on your teammates to help you get to the goal if you're the one carrying the satellite so that you can throw it in and score. And so it has this weird, like, quasi, like, esports kind of vibe to it where it's like I could actually see this maybe being a thing that people would be into or that would be interesting to watch. Just because it's kind of different, it's kind of unique. Not so much the concept, because there's certainly been games that have had like mixed shooting and sporting elements before. Like there were on Unreal Tournament mods back in the day that did similar things. But I don't know, there's just something about it that kind of resonated with me.
Oh, it's definitely got that classic, again, the arena or arcade first-person shooter vibe with a lot of those game modes. Again, like with Uplink, and you have your classics, or you have like your norm, which is like team deathmatch, domination, and all that other good stuff. And you also have Kill Confirmed, which they brought back, which I was happy about because I did like that game mode.
I'm definitely a fan of that one also. I really like the fact that you have to collect the tags. Like that's really cool because it changes the dynamic of how you play the game, right? Because like if you see a bunch of tags laying around in the middle of an open area, you got to think, oh man, there's some guy sniping there, but I really want those tags. How am I gonna get those without dying? But I do think they have like a good variety of modes. I also like some of the playlist options they have, which I know are nothing new to the series, but it's nice to have like the ground forces mode or whatever, where it's like they mix team deathmatch and domination and kill confirmed all into the same playlist. So you're kind of like always just bouncing back and forth between those different modes. Stuff like that's kind of cool. I also have been really dying to play that search and rescue mode where it's kind of like Counter-Strike-y, where you have like one life per round unless somebody like grabs your tags, which gives you like a respawn. I think that seems like it could be really fun, but I only had the chance to play like half a round of that because I was having trouble finding an active lobby for it. but it seemed really cool from what little bit of it that I did see.
Well, which is, I think, which is definitely an issue that I've run into, especially today, because there was a good 20 minutes, half an hour when I was where it really felt like I was just trying to find a lobby of something, not any of those other like kind of off the cuff, unique sort of playlists or anything, like just a server period, and
Hmm.
I was really just having trouble finding something.
It kind of makes me wonder if you didn't get caught in the patch time, right? Because they did just put a patch out today, which I don't know if you saw that or play if you know for sure if you played since the patch or whatever. But I know for sure there was one today.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point because then I ended up I ended up I think quitting out of the game after I couldn't find something for a while, and that's when I saw that, oh, like I had the update. So I'm like, oh, okay, well maybe let the game update, see what happens after that. And I was trying to see if it was something like server wise, to see if it smoothed out or not.
Hmm.
And it seemed like it did at first, but then I was getting some hangups a little bit again. But no, not nearly as bad as like before the patch. So
I
they
feel
did
like
something a little bit right.
it's really difficult to play a Twitch shooter like that in the middle of the day, in my experience too. Like the way the nature of the internet and how it kind of ebbs and flows, at least here in the U.S. on like the East Coast, such as we are. I feel like 9 to 5, during the day is a pretty rough time for the internet as a whole in our neck of the woods. As far as like latency and stuff like that goes, there's so much like huge crazy amounts of traffic, all the time that it's pretty tough to get a good smooth game in the middle of the day on any game.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess I would just wrap up my kind of thoughts on COD as just saying, I'm really pleasantly surprised and happy and feeling pretty good about my purchase of that game. I feel like it was a good move. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. I did go for the season pass because I wanted to get I figured I was going to get it anyway, so I just did the $10 discount thing on the pre-order, and I'm feeling pretty good about that based on what I've seen so far. It seems like, you know, if the map quality of the season pass maps is at least as good as what's in the base game, I feel like that's gonna help keep that game, you know, vital and interesting and fun, for a good long while. And I'm also, admittedly, kind of looking forward to seeing what they end up doing with the zombie mode because apparently that's going to be part of the season pass too.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So they're stealing from Treyarch's playbook, I guess, and actually going to do like advanced warfare zombies, which is kind of weird. But I'm curious to check it out. I mean, based on what they've done so far, I feel like they've earned a little latitude. Like I'm going to give them a chance to see what they can do with that concept.
Hopefully they do something interesting with it.
Yeah, I know the last zombies that I saw, I think it was the one from COD Blops 2. I didn't actually play it, but I saw some of it played, and it just seemed like crazy complicated and cryptic in a way that seemed kind of like not desirable. But having not actually played it firsthand, I really couldn't comment on it beyond that. But hopefully this will be something a little more, straightforward and easy to get into.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, my final thoughts on COD is I'm pleasantly surprised so far, and until further notice, I would say that you know it's a good iteration. That's for sure.
Yeah, yep, no doubt. Um, okay, so let's see. What else do we want to get into?
Well, I did mention the early access thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. So let's circle back around and talk a little bit about that because our favorite game just got another patch today, and I say that kind of a little bit tongue in cheek because for a long time there, DayZ was my favorite game. Like in all seriousness, back when I used to play the mod and was so like hyped on that game, I thought my head was gonna explode. Um, but man, if that's not a buyer beware for early access, I don't know what is.
Yeah, so those of you who are unaware of the whole DayZ conundrum, I guess I think that'd be appropriate enough to call it at this point. Um, Basically, it's a matter of the game when it was first announced. I guess the standalone version of DayZ when it was first announced basically had people believing that the game was in a finished state. And this was way back. This is going back a year or two maybe now. It's been that long. And which had diehard fans of what the mod was, like me and VT, really excited about the game. We wanted to, see like the next big step for, this franchise that we really loved. And you know, it just
Okay, so
yeah.
to back it up for a second, and to be fair, um, so what you're talking about is like that initial claim, like whenever they very first said they were going to do a standalone game, and it was going to be their claim was that it was going to be out and done by the end of that year, whatever that year was. I think it was like 2012 was the year, or maybe it was 2013. Uh, Whenever they said, we're going to have a standalone game out in, in a couple of months by the end of that year. But that was one thing, and that was like probably the first warning sign that like maybe they were not to be trusted in terms of the things they said versus the things they actually do. Um, but basically what I think we probably should focus on is the early access Steam version of the game, right, which came out on early access a little over a year ago now. So that was like whatever, like a year and a couple of months ago, I think is when the game first became available on Steam early access. And ever since that point, there's been this whole question of like, what is it that they're actually doing with this game, right? Because when you look at the typical development cycle for a game, how long it takes to do things, and speaking as somebody who actually makes games, I have a pretty good idea about that sort of thing. And so you have a certain expectation or a sort of certain reasonable idea of what it actually takes to get certain things done. And it's one of those cases where every time I see patch notes on that game, even taking into consideration that it's an alpha, even taking into consideration that it's early access and not supposed to be done or anything like that, you just look at the progress they're making in these patches that they release every couple of months, and I find myself scratching my head going, what are you people doing? What exactly are you doing with your time and the money that was dumped into this game by all of the people who bought this early access version that 11 or 12 or 13 or 14 months down the road, you're only at the point that you're at now? That just seems insane to me.
Oh, absolutely. And to add on, to that, it's like, I think, and that's a great point that you bring up, all the money that it made, because I think within the first week that game sold, it sold the magic number, 1 million copies. And again, subsequently, this game has been close now to a year, probably a little bit more than a year now in development, and you know, the very fundamental thing of just the mod is still not in the game. It's still broken beyond, any reasonable, fathomable, put it, add another one of those in there, sort of.
Plausible.
Yeah, there you go. That's another one.
I like my
Sort of
bowls.
just, yeah, my ubbles.
Um,
It, it should be a lot more finished than than it is.
well, here's the bottom line for me with DayZ is I look at the patch notes every time a new patch comes out for that game, and I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for zombies that function properly and vehicles. And until both of those things are in that game is nowhere close to being done. And you can put whatever features you want or whatever content you want into that game, but if you don't have those two fundamental principles down and implemented into the game, you really don't have anything. Because when you get down to what made the mod like anything of value or merit, it was the struggle against the undead and having to weigh like the risk of dealing with the undead versus dealing with other players and having something to work for or build towards, which in the case of the mod was the vehicles. Having your motor pool of vehicles that you'd gone around and scavenged parts for from the map and were trying to build and maintain and hide from the other players with your friends and stuff like that. And like, you know, say what you want about like technical pluses or minuses of the standalone version in its current form, but like the game is just not fun without those two like core conceits. Like if the zombies aren't a credible, meaningful threat to the player and don't influence the player behavior in some way, and there's nothing to work towards beyond pure survival, the game is just fundamentally broken in a way that it shouldn't be at this point in its development. I mean, you can add whatever content and features you want, but if you're not getting those fundamental basic principles right, you're already failing at that game design.
Oh yeah, because it's a kill box at at this moment in time. DayZ standalone is a kill box because
hmm
that's all that the players can do.
hmm
Really?
Well, and I mean, it's all become about like how can you mess with another player, right? Like because now instead of giving you other things to do than screw with people, all they've done is given you more unique and twisted ways to screw with people. It's like now I can knock you out and handcuff you and force feed you bleach and make you dance on one leg and then throw you off a building. Great. That's like way to prolong my agony game. But like don't give me something to actually hope for or make my gameplay experience at all better or interesting. No, let's give people more ways to screw with me. That's because that's good. um it's like you read the patch notes on the patch that came out today, and it's stuff like can now barricade doors, can now lock doors. Oh, so great. So now when I lock the door and the zombie comes running through and clips through the wall and still eats my face off, that'll be 10 times as more frustrating. It's just like stuff like that just drives me bonkers. I look at the things that are kind of sketchy about that game or kind of bad about it, and I'm like, come on, guys. Like, really, these are the things you're focusing on? These are the things that you think are important to get right before you focus on details? It's like, we were talking about it a little before the show started, and, it's like they're almost in reverse development mode with that game, where they're spending all of this time concentrating on stuff that is normally the stuff you do after your core mechanics were fleshed out and perfect. It's like they're building all this content and all these systems and all these layers on top of something that's fundamentally poor to begin with.
Which, and again, much like we discussed before the show, it's like, and what happens when you run into that really or what happens when you try and implement something just its very core into the game, and it doesn't agree with one or more systems that you've already, or one or more of the pieces of content that you've already put into the game. It's like now you have to go back and recode that so it doesn't freak out anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Like, you can make all the content that you want, but if you make all this content and then something fundamental about your game mechanics changes, and you therefore can therefore that breaks all of that content that you put in. Guess what? You're redoing your content at that point. So what was the point of doing all that content before your mechanics are sound? It boggles my mind, the approach that they're taking to developing that game. I don't see how that ends in anything but tears for all concerned.
Yeah, for those of you who really have, like a horse in this race, of just hoping that, and hoping against hope that, our beloved game will actually pan out in some positive way. Because, again, right now, its current state is just having me just worried about the game itself, because especially given all the other, survival games, because ever since that whole survival genre blew up with the mod, there are some serious contenders now that are going to start to come out of the woodwork. I mean, we've talked about it here, 7 Days to Die.
Hmm.
It was on a
Great
real
game.
fast track. Yeah, real fast track to making a super hard, or very legitimate push to being, you know, a contender, being like one of the be all end all survival games to pick up and play for sure.
Hmm.
And at the rate they're going, again, sheesh, you give it a few more years, it's a fully polished, fully, realized
Realized. Yeah.
game. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be something. And I think even more worrisome now is like Sony's caught on,
Hmm.
and now all the work that they're doing with H1Z1, and the some of the people who've been able to get in and take a look at it, and kind of reporting on the progress that thing has made, and it's like the alpha for that thing could come out by the end of the year,
It's
which
supposed
is
to, from what I
yeah,
understand. Yeah.
which is now that boggles me. It's like, talk about opposite ends of the spectrum. How DayZ can still be broken and unplayable from a year now, or still after a year, I should say, and H1Z1 after a very short time in development can already be possibly finished enough to pick up and play already. And that's going to
Hmm.
be a very dangerous and telling thing, at least in the case of DayZ, is like, if H1Z1 is at the very least playable, which, I mean, given the studio that Sony is using for this project, it kind of, in my mind, is basically a no-brainer. Like, this thing is going to be finished, or in a playable state of some sort. And it's like, it might very well eat DayZ's lunch if it doesn't, again, at the very least, become playable within the next few months. DayZ, that is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely crazy to me how those guys working on DayZ have basically allowed their lunch to get eaten, or basically are, letting their lunch be eaten so thoroughly by their competition. At least it would appear to be the case at this point, that that's what's occurring, because you just look at all of those other games that you mentioned, 7 Days, H1Z1. Hell, I looked at the newest build of the Dead Linger the other day, and I thought to myself, man, there's some stuff in here that DayZ doesn't have yet. Like, and that's saying something, because those guys have nothing when it comes to resources by comparison to what Bohemia has on that game. Like the fact
Oh,
that like the handful of people that are working on Dead Linger are making more progress than the people working on DayZ are is insane to me.
well, that, and I think that's why, I mean, that's why this whole thing has been so crazy, I think, to us. This throughout the entire developing of this standalone game is, especially again, given its already insane success and how much money they've already made off of the game, how they're not working, that much harder to get it done,
Mhm.
to get in there and just get all that stuff done already.
Mhm.
Especially again with the given, geez, they have endless amounts of resources now. You could seriously take the game to a place where not even mod, not even the mod community could have taken it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's frustrating is what I think it boils down to, and like you kind of alluded to before, like a lot of that frustration is just, we want the game to be good. We want it to be awesome. We've seen the potential of what that game could be from playing the mod for, a year or more that we did. And it's just vexing to like see it just languishing the way that it is right now. It almost makes me wish, like, I don't know, like it just would either like die and go away, or they get their act together and make it happen, because this like limbo state that it's in is just, it's painful.
Exactly. I think just the game itself, just it deserves better treatment than its very own creators are, giving it the pleasure to.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see how that situation has been allowed to reach the point that it is at right now, because at the rate they're going, unless they've been completely sandbagging, and there's really like this tremendous amount of stuff that's been getting done behind the scenes that like we as the general public are simply not aware of, and there's going to be like this build that comes out in a month that's like completely mind-blowingly better than what we've been seeing so far. I just don't see where all this time and effort has been going. Like it's not reflected in the product, that's for sure. But I think we've beat that horse pretty much into a coma. I don't think there's really anything more to say about that, honestly.
Comatose.
Yeah. So, and that's the other reason, like, I hate talking about industry stuff because so often it's so negative. Like, and I really don't want to be negative about everything. Like, I don't want to be like, oh man, this sucks and that sucks and this isn't getting done right and this is garbage. Like that's not, that's not cool. It's not fun for anyone. So, I kind of want to, focus more on things that are the positive things that are happening, and the games that are cool and are doing things right, than, dwell on, who's screwing up this week.
Well, that's, yeah, and it's just that hope, that the industry will do something cool
Hmm.
and not, be in its current, just like like making billions and losing millions, sort of just really odd shifts that you have going right now in the industry where, ultimately it's just the people who have the money, like the big time players who can actually churn out these games, and they're able to get their product out there at the TV and get millions of people to buy their shit. And these actual, like, good games or games that do have potential that, but have nowhere near the budget or the resources to actually, like, get the product to the customer to begin with, or get it just in the hands or in the eyes of the public. And that's why people are pissed that we see more Call of Duties, because as much as we like it, I know that, Jesus, there's a ton of people out there that just, no matter how competent, no matter how good the game might be, they just don't like it based on the principle of, what Activision has done in the past.
Right. Yeah, I heard. It was. I'll actually give proper attribution for this quote. It was Jeff Gersman from Giant Bomb said something about like how the new Call of Duty game and the new Assassin's Creed game this year are paying for the sins of their predecessors. Basically that like because Ghosts was so subpar and so like broken and just uninteresting, it's almost like there's the concern that like even though Advanced Warfare actually is a really good game, it's going to be overlooked or shunned because of the fact that Activision let a game out the door last year that wasn't up to snuff.
Yeah, but it's like they made that bed, and unfortunately, you know, they're gonna have to lay in it. And it's like, as much as, again, like, I really like that game, but I wish that, you know, like, if I had to wait for that game every 2 years and make sure that it was absolutely kind of something like that every year, I would be willing to wait. Like, which is another reason why some people always kind of scratch their heads at these companies, where it's like, I don't understand why you have to, when people say, I don't understand, like, what is with the whole yearly thing? And honestly, I'm kind of with that too. Especially squared at EA, because I'm the same way with NHL games. It's like, is there really a need for, an NHL game every year? Is there really a need for another Call of Duty every year? No, there isn't. That's like the be all end all answer, I guess, in this case. Is like, people, we don't want yearly sequels. We like sequels of this stuff, and we want to keep seeing like the same game, but we don't want to see it every year where, again, the quality of the game is going to be hindered because you guys are just cutting corners to get the game out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a publisher might make the argument of, that's why they have different teams working on each, version of the game, right? That's why you have Sledgehammer doing Advanced Warfare and Infinity Ward doing whatever they're doing and so on and so forth. But I mean, then that raises the whole issue of, well, is this team as good as this other team? Are they as technically competent? Are they making it happen the way that they need to actually live up to the standards of the series? And you get into all that like sort of gray area where it's like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, that is tough. That is tough at that point.
Lies. uh, Stupid unicorn. But yeah, I think that there's a real issue. It's a very pervasive issue in video game industry in general, and in honestly the attitudes of most people who play video games, which is to be very broad and generalizing and paint with a very broad brush and speak in very broad general terms about a lot of this stuff. And I really feel like one of the things that we as gamers really need to start doing more is to back away from the idea of painting with such a broad brush when we talk about what's going on with games. Because there's that tendency to think, oh, everything is garbage, everything is, the same, judge everybody by the actions of what one publisher or what one developer does, and not really look at what's going on an individual case-by-case basis. And a lot of that is just human nature. It's easier to lump things and put things together and say, you guys are all in this same boat because, well, I don't want to be bothered to think about, what's actually different about this situation. But just because it's easy doesn't necessarily mean it should be encouraged or we should be advocating that. So I feel like the the Call of Duty thing is a good example, right? Where it's like, just because there have been bad Call of Duty games doesn't necessarily mean that the new one is going to be bad. Or just because there have been good Battlefield games for a long time doesn't mean that the new one is going to be good. It goes both ways, and it's about like actually looking at what's going on in a given situation and making a judgment based off of that, and not just being prejudicial and saying, oh, it's been this way for so long, it's got to be this way forever. I think that's something that we as hobbyists or people who are into this sort of thing should be keen to avoid.
Yeah, and again, I just wish that we would see it more often. It being the case.
Well, it's certainly nice to be proven wrong, right? It's certainly nice to like have a negative expectation or have something that you think is going to go poorly, and then have it work out. That's always nice, even though it is pretty rare. So I tend to want to look for that. I tend to prefer to have that sort of experience than to like, have a more pessimistic outlook and assume that things are going to be lousy. Like that's the thing, right? Like if I had a generally pessimistic view on Call of Duty, I never even would have given that new game a chance. And I would have missed out on something that's actually pretty cool as a result of that. And so I think that's, to me, the best example currently at the moment of why you don't want to do that. Because the simple fact is, just because something's been a certain way for a while or been trending a certain way doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And, that goes both ways. That goes for things that appear to be good and things that appear to be bad. But it's still about looking at that thing as it currently exists, or that current new version of it, and assessing it for what it is, in its own context.
Yeah, gamers, stop being crazy.
Yeah, why you so crazy? Why you no help me? I'm probably gonna regret this.
Speaking of things staying the same, or I guess speaking of big time developers, publishers, Rockstar uh, is putting a first person mode into Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah, so there's actually been a few different news items about this sort of stuff lately, where it's basically like either new versions of old games or new features being patched into previously released games. And I like that sort of thing. Like I like a little post-release support, or in the case of the Rockstar thing, an incentive, right? Where it's like, oh, if you already played GTA 5 on PS3 or 360, here's this new version we're trying to sell you, which, by the way, has this new feature in it that we haven't just mailed in, but have actually put some effort into. That being that first person thing, where they haven't just, for example, lowered the camera to create a first person view. They've literally, made the effort to add animations and a proper perspective, so that you can actually see your extremities and things like that whenever you're interacting with stuff in the game. And I gotta say, like, having seen some video of it, I think it looks really good, and it makes me think, man, like this could be a really compelling way to experience that game. Like I could totally see myself picking up GTA 5 on PC and playing it completely in first person.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go.
Talisman freak out engaged. um, but I mean, just to add a little bit to that, the devs were saying, they've actually been thinking about doing first-person views in GTA games for a long time now, but the reason that they waited to do it in this particular version is this is the first time they've been able to represent the world in a high enough level of visual fidelity to actually justify the first person view, such that you're not losing anything by going to first person in terms of detail and quality of the environment, in the way that you might have in the previous games, which I think makes a lot of sense to me because certainly a big part of game development is illusion, right? It's about like making the textures good enough so that they look good based on where your camera is positioned, but maybe wouldn't stand up to closer inspection. And like you're building these huge open worlds with like such varied terrain and detail and architecture and stuff. Of course on an older system, you would have to limit the quality of those textures in a way that might not stand up to a first person point of view. So it makes sense, given the increase in fidelity in these newer systems and in modern gaming PCs, that you would take advantage of that and actually be able to get that perspective. So I mean that all makes pretty good sense to me and seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, having played the game through the last gen consoles, I could say that even being a last gen, technically a last gen game, it holds up, man. It really does. Like even on the 360, it's still you could I mean, and it's clear you could see where they had to cut corners or whatever, graphically, but again, I think just overall you still get what they were going for. It's not
Hmm.
so hindered that you can't look at it or whatever because it's so visually unappealing, if I could put
Hmm.
it that way.
Hmm. I mean, I think that's been one of the things that's been a standout thing for Rockstar ever since the days of the PS2, right? Was like squeezing every last little bit of performance they could out of, those console platforms. I mean, what they did on the PS2 with those GTA 3 era games, like Vice City and San Andreas and all that, is like nothing short of amazing. And like you forget that now, looking back on them and kind of like losing that context for what hardware was like back then. But like that was a heck of a thing to squeeze that game onto a PS2.
Oh, geez, especially, I mean, you want to talk about a game that, you could scale to anywhere, again, much like Grand Theft Auto 5, where, again, it feels like, anywhere that you look in that game, it's not the illusion of, oh, wouldn't it be cool to go visit that place? It's like now in Grand Theft Auto 5, you literally can go anywhere that you see, of course, appropriately
Hmm.
in the game map. Um,
Sure.
but and again, it's like San Andreas felt the same way because there was a lot of unique locales in that game too,
Hmm.
very widespread across many different landscapes and all that. So Rockstar, they just know what they're doing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that for the most part. I mean, there's definitely been a few things they've done over the years that I thought were of questionable merit, but for the most part, I think they're definitely up there in that top tier of developers for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Nobody is without fault. I mean, but that's the thing. It's like I guess in terms of the quality of their output and have they pissed me off this week or this
Nice.
month or this year, you know uh, because Bethesda surely has, as much as I like Bethesda for giving me all the games that they have, because I would definitely put them up there with Rockstar, but again, some of the stuff that they've done recently too has kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Hmm. Okay, so I think that's probably enough industry talk. I'm 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 burnt out. um, have you been playing anything else? What else have you been playing other than COD?
I've been playing some NHL 15.
How's
For
that
the
treating you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been playing it too from the last gen consoles because EA's whole whatever it is, friggin' early access approach to their friggin'
Yeah, to the next gen
oh
hockey game. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so forget all that. Put that all aside for the moment because that's the
All right,
same
all right.
rabbit hole we've already been down. What do you think about the previous gen version of NHL 15? Like just taken as its own thing. What do you think? Is it good?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed it because it basically did everything that I wanted it to. Because me, I'm huge into the be a GM mode. And so, they made a lot of changes that I wanted to see, from my point of view in that sort of uh, that same realm. And so, they made me happy with those changes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, again, I have the last gen version, so I think they call it the complete hockey experience or something. So you get all of the features already in the game. So, and maybe beyond that, it's basically, you get your online team play, which everybody's missing right now from the next gen stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's fun to just kind of jump in and, you play a few games, you get your games, you try and get your wins to progress your guy and make him better for online play. And, they have the live a life mode, which is basically just the be a pro mode still in the game. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's very competent. Um, Unfortunately, visually it looks virtually identical to NHL 14, but it's just those few fundamental changes to some of the game modes that kind of have made it worth buying.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did sit on it for a while. I wanted to make sure I got the right version of the game. So, but I'm happy with the last gen version.
Mm-hmm. One would hope that this will be the last year that you would have to do that, but I mean, like I think a lot of people probably were disappointed that the sort of version that they're shipping this year wasn't the sort of version they shipped last year when the consoles were new. Like I feel like what they did with the next gen version would have made a lot more sense had that game come out last year, as opposed to this year. But at the same time, uh, that's just water under the bridge, I guess, at this point. You just kind of have to accept that that's the way things went and, go from there. But I can definitely understand why a lot of people would choose the previous gen version based on those features, for sure. I've noticed this trend where every time the AI takes over because I take too long to make my turn, it immediately attacks the assassin. I think it's trying to tell me something.
Just trying to tell you to stop him.
Yeah, I honestly just don't consider him a threat, like when I'm under normal circumstances. Although I probably would have done that. That was actually I was actually thinking about doing that when I took the porter because that was the only reason I didn't do it earlier because I didn't have I would have had to drop something to take that. I probably should look at just going to the middle here. Like I was trying to get some more gold so that I could get my lives back up to normal and my fade up a little bit, but I should probably just end this.
End it. I mean, you're so far out ahead. I mean,
Hmm.
that's why I'm just like, I don't understand why you wouldn't.
Well, it's I'm just worried about getting screwed because I'm gonna have to take the strength path. So I'm worried about getting screwed on the Reaper, like not having fate and only having 3 lives. But
Ah,
I should probably just go for it.
do it.
It's the one thing I haven't had this game is gold. I think I only had like the one gold that I started the game with, and I've never gotten any more since then. Although I can't really complain because I've been getting really lucky on trophies.
So have you been keeping up with Hearthstone
I
much?
actually have not played any Hearthstone since the last time I streamed it. Um, which is crazy because I hadn't been playing it almost every day up until that point, whether I streamed it or not. But I don't know, I kind of hit a point with it where, oh, seriously? God, I hate this card. Oh man, that guy just DC'd. Well, the good thing about that, I think, is that it just reset my turn. Yeah. Oh no, it took. Wow, that was weird. It took his turn. I like missed my turn because of that somehow. That was very strange. He must have dropped like right in the middle of the turn switch because it basically redid his turn.
That's so weird.
You see how that happened? That was
Yeah.
weird. All right, let's try one more time to get this damn
Do-do-do.
unicorn. Oh my god, game. Oh god, seriously?
Just go for the
Seriously.
middle.
Oh god. Alright. But that's the thing, right? Like I'm not immune. Like there's no way that I can guarantee that I'm gonna get past death with the stats that I have. It's not like it's a sure thing. At the very least, I need to go to the castle and get my lives back off the princess. Especially now that I just lost another one there. I mean, if somebody else was going for it, obviously that's what I would do. But, like, there's really no rush. I'm also rolling really poorly on my movement rolls for some reason, even though I'm rolling 2 dice every time. Seems like I'm not getting the opportunity to move very far.
It's being a dick.
But yeah, I haven't really touched Hearthstone. I know there's that expansion pack that's coming out soon. I know they just banned a bunch of people for running bots and cheating and stuff, which is good. There've definitely been times when I've been playing where I'm pretty sure I was playing against a bot, which is always frustrating. um, so that's yeah. I definitely still like that game. I definitely would never say it's a bad game or anything like that, but it's also not a game that I'm like super enthusiastic about at the moment either.
Fair enough.
And I'm not even sure what it would take at this point to get me back into it heavily. It's a weird it's a weird Blizzard phenomenon, right? Where like a lot of their games have this weird addiction cycle where it's like you play it just because you play it all the time, but then like once you kind of snap out of it and break away from it for a few days, you're like, why am I playing this all the time? It's kind of like that wow factor a little bit.
Especially nowadays. Wow.
Yeah, I tried to go back and play it recently, like just screwing around with one of the free accounts. And man, I have trouble even looking at that game anymore. like just visually, I think it looks like so dated and so like I don't know, just unappealing compared to like what I'm spending most of my time playing these days. It's like it's starting to really show its age, I feel like.
I mean, I think it's telling when, because I watched I was reading an article on Kotaku the other day about, uh, and I don't know how you would qualify this as news. Thank you, Kotaku. But how they were talking about how there's this like a level 103 boss or something in WoW, and how like an entire server took it down. But it's kind of worrying when you look at the comments section and you see most of the people there going like, "Man, this just looks dated." Because that's
Hmm.
what the majority of the comments were saying. It wasn't like, "Oh, that looks cool," or "Oh man, that's so crazy." They were all like,
Well, I feel like there was this weird kind of collective hypnotic effect that occurred with a lot of us who were playing WoW hardcore for a long time, where it's like at a certain point your brain kind of filled in the blanks with the visuals because it was like the visuals were always like good enough that they kind of at the very least alluded to what they were trying to present in such a way that like it was very easy for your brain to kind of fill in the blanks and say, oh, okay, I know how this would ideally look if the graphics were better, and because you were into the gameplay or because you were having a fun social experience or whatever, you kind of looked past any of the rough edges or any of like the subpar game stuff, and I feel like that, but that ship has sailed, right? Like we're not at that point anymore, as far as people being willing or able to look past that. I feel like the gap between like what's currently acceptable, from that standpoint of visual presentation on a AAA game, the gap is just too wide now for WoW to overcome, even with nostalgia or the social context or whatever.
"Oh yeah, yeah, it's too much to just like kind of shrug or just ignore anymore." Because it really hasn't had, and that's another problem with it too, is like it really hasn't had a significant upgrade in graphics or anything. Which I guess, I mean, given, and it really is kind of hard to do that. Like I understand the kind of the issue with that, honestly. From having such a wide variety of people from all over the world who play your game, it's kind of hard to kind of upgrade it to such a crazy level, that it might not run on some people's machines. Because you
Hmm.
don't know, because that's the thing. WoW is not very, it takes up a lot of space, but it's not very taxing. Like, you just need a pretty good internet, connection, and you're basically good to go.
Hmm.
Because it's not, again, a very
Well,
taxing game
it
from a
scales.
hardware.
It scales very well, is what I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, because you can run it on basically anything at this point. You could probably run that game on a tablet pretty easily if you wanted to.
Oh, I know my cousin for a while when he had his laptop, he was able to play it competently on his laptop. I mean, and again, it wasn't anything special. It was, you know, it wasn't like a gaming laptop or anything. It was just like a civilian, pick me up sort of,
Hmm.
and he did fine with it. So,
I'm such an idiot, dude. I went in there. I don't even have a talisman.
oh jeez. Well, at least you realized it.
Yeah,
I remember the one time we were playing, you had to go
yeah, yeah,
go all the way back.
yeah, yeah. I don't even know what I was thinking there. It's one of those things where sometimes you can zone out playing this game. That was definitely what happened there. Yeah, it's WoW's a weird one because like I played that game for a long time, really intensely, and really devotedly, and loved the experience I had playing it, and would never trade that for anything. Like the 5 or 6 years that I spent playing that game, and the times I had with my guilds and stuff like that, like fantastic, great, wonderful, epic, awesome experiences, like 90% of the time. Um, but at the same time, I feel like for me anyway, it got to a point where I just wanted a new game. And it's like no matter how many coats of paint you put on that thing, it's still that same game from 2004 at this point. It's just like a 10-year-old game. And if you just stop and think about it for a minute, like there aren't many games that you still play with that level of dedication that you were playing 10 years ago, and that's that way for a reason.
Well, yeah, I think just gaming is like that, especially if you're like a hardcore enthusiast, like playing one game for any length of time. Like binge playing a game could really ruin an experience for, gamers like me and you
Hmm.
because, again, the way that we devour content, it's like we might really, really love that game, but, it's like it still might just be a matter of, consuming, again, a game too quickly.
Hmm.
It ends up kind of, possibly either ruining the experience or just kind of picking it up and finishing it so quickly that you never really even got a chance to kind of go back and maybe keep playing it because you've kind of exhausted everything that the game had.
Yeah, I mean, well, I talk about that quite frequently. The idea of like, a lot of times games aren't bad, but they just aren't, they don't have that longevity. They don't have that satisfying, deep kind of gameplay that's gonna just keep you going like long term. And that's just the way it is sometimes. A game can be fantastic, but just like light on content. There's nothing really wrong with that, but I feel like that's something that people tend to want to expect of games, and maybe it's an unfair expectation or an unfair default behavior to want to get like X amount of value out of a game or X amount of time out of a game for the price paid for it. But that's such a subjective kind of weird thing when you stop and think about it, because it's like, I definitely got way more hours of entertainment out of WoW than the money that I paid for it relative to what I spent on other games. But I also felt, because like they were hitting me every month for that recurring fee, like I almost felt like entitled to that in a way that I wouldn't have had it had not had a subscription involved.
Yeah, yeah. Which is another kind of taxing thing about WoW, because it's like for a game that's 2004, it's like, can you conceivably, which I know for a fact this is one of the issues that you ran into. It's like, could you really justify paying $15 a month playing a game from 2004?
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah,
it just
yeah.
it gets to that point, you know.
Well, I've been saying this for the past couple of expansion packs now because I skipped Mists of Pandaria. The last expansion that I played was Cataclysm, and I said it since Cataclysm, like that was the last time I was willing to pay the monthly fee to play that game. Like if they'd have made it so that when you bought Mists, you could play as much as you wanted for the purchase of that expansion pack, I'd probably still be playing WoW, or at least still log into it occasionally and dink around with it, And I'd say the same thing about Warriors of Draenor, like or Warlords of Draenor. Like I would probably buy that expansion and return to that game and fiddle around with it if I didn't have to pay a monthly fee to do it. Like that ship has sailed. Like that game does not justify in my mind, 12 or 13 or $15 a month, depending on what kind of subscription you go for.
Yeah, yeah. And and again, it's kind of the same thing that we ran into with another MMO, Defiance.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like we really super enjoyed all the time that we put into that game, and especially, I mean, me, I put more time than I'm comfortable saying into that game.
Mm-hmm.
But and it's just like, but at some point, if it's just light on content, it's light on content. But it definitely doesn't mean because I got my money's worth out of that and more.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Especially,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with WoW. Like, I just think at some point you just want to play a different game.
Well,
Which is why, like I mean, I revisited it just a few months ago because I kind of missed it. But
mm-hmm.
you know,
Well, and it's like, the core mechanical competency of that game is still solid. Like, you load that game up and you go around and you shoot a couple things and you do a few combat rolls and you take some cover. Like, that game still feels good to play. But the problem with it is that, it's the other end of the extreme, right? It's where, like, the core mechanic is so polished and refined and perfect, but then there's just not enough to do with that core mechanic. It's like the depth just isn't there. So it's like while you're playing it and you're having fun with it, it's feels great. But then, you get to that point where it's just like you can only do the same thing so many times before you just get bored with it.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna try to hurry up here and get this over with, but I literally well, it was weird. This is one of those weird games where like certain things I got like so quickly, and then other things I didn't get at all. Like I never got a talisman. I never got any gold. Like just weird stuff like that. Like if I had had to pay to get my lives back, if I hadn't have picked up that princess follower, I don't know what I would have done, because I just couldn't get any gold to save my life. I guess I had to gone to the city and use the alchemist or something.
That's definitely a way to go.
Boom shakalaka. I am a little bit concerned about the fact that I only have 1 point of fate, but hopefully I'll just get a good roll here on the deal with death, or duel with death. So yeah, I'm trying to think if I've been playing anything else that's been interesting or noteworthy. I completed my first multiplayer game of Beyond Earth this past weekend, so that was kind of fun.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been playing Civ Beyond Earth as well.
I've definitely been a little more disappointed in that game the further I've gotten into it. Like it kind of reminds me of how I felt about Civ 5 before the expansion packs for that were released, where it's like the core game is quite good, but it feels like a little light on content. It feels like there's some features or some options there that I feel are a little bit lacking. Like, and I kind of maybe alluded to this slightly before, but I definitely feel like it still rings true that like I feel like that game was maybe a little bit rushed, um, in a way that's a little bit disappointing, especially given Firaxis's normal track record for like polish and shipping complete games and such. But it's still quite good. Like it's the complaints that I have with it are fairly minor, but I also kind of feel like playing that game, it really feels like it's missing an expansion pack or two to be complete in a weird way. And maybe that's just because I've come to expect that from the series.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a big strategy guy anyways, but like I definitely enjoyed the stuff that I've played of it so far. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I will also say that, again, it does feel a little bit simplistic to me.
Mm-hmm.
Almost in a, and it's weird to say that because again, it's like it's a Civ game. It's supposed to be a little bit more confusing. Like, I mean, I've played Civ 5, so I mean, I guess that helped a little bit
Mm-hmm.
in doing that. But yeah, I just like the whole affinity thing. It
Mm-hmm.
seems kind of easy to get those. Like, it doesn't seem nearly as difficult to get.
The thing that I was kind of disappointed in is that it doesn't seem like there's as much of a need to specialize as I was led to believe that there would be. Like I really thought it was going to be more a case like, oh, I'm playing a purity game, and so I'm not really going to see or get a lot of the supremacy or harmony stuff. Like because I'm going to go down this path, and that's going to like dictate the sort of units I get and everything. But I find that that's not really the case. It seems like, especially as you get deeper into the game, it seems like you end up touching all of the affinities, at least to a certain extent, just to survive. And like while you might like focus on one in particular, or you inevitably end up focusing on one in particular, you're still dabbling in the other ones at least a little bit because the game kind of requires that you do that. Um, and I feel like that's almost kind of like a missed opportunity because I feel like it would be cooler to have to specialize more and go in a more distinct direction with your techs and stuff and your kind of gameplay, uh, and like face the consequences of that. But the fact that you can like kind of mix and match and pull this from this discipline or this from that other discipline to a large extent, again, especially as you get further into the game, that becomes easier to do. I think kind of dilutes it to a certain extent. Like I liked the idea of it being a little more, I don't know, edgy or hardcore in the sense of like really having to like have a strategy and play towards that and accept the consequences of that strategy. It just seems like this, I don't know, in a weird way, like a little bit of a lack of challenge in that game that I was kind of surprised by.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I would actually echo that because honestly, it seems like the only thing that is the most irksome about that game is the aliens. And it's like, but as soon as you start, which but it's weird because after you start getting into those, again, those later affinities and your units start getting more stronger and stronger, they seem to kind of be just like a complete afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't seem nearly as difficult as before or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely still enjoying my time with the game. I still think it's cool and it was worth my time and money and all that. I definitely don't have any like really dire negative things to say about it, but it also doesn't feel like maybe it's as complete or fleshed out or vital as I was kind of hoping that it would be, or is that it seemed to be based on my initial like hours spent with it. It seems like there's kind of a veneer to that game where once you've played, maybe 5, 6, or 10 hours of it, like you start to see through some of the things that initially seem to be more deep or cool or interesting, and you realize that they're not as deep and cool and interesting as they at first appeared to be. And I guess that's, if I have any disappointment about that game, I guess that's what it basically boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely more of a, like, we for a short while played Age of Wonders 3,
Hmm.
and
I love that game.
yeah, I like that a
Yeah.
whole lot more than, I mean, that's the thing, because Civ, I didn't grow up with Civ.
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why I'm kind of in that space where it's like, I didn't really grow up with it, so that's why, like I play it, but at the same time I don't really, like I
Revere
don't
it. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. It's like I'm not very good at it, and it's like it's a pick up and play thing for me. But it's like Age of Wonders, like that hits a few for me because like I'm a huge role playing game fan.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have tons of elements of that in it. And then again, the strategy stuff is just simple enough, I guess, in the city creating
Mm-hmm.
that, it's like, okay, you kind of build your city or your cities up and, you kind of, build your units or whatever and you recruit heroes and stuff. Like it's just there's a lot more to do. And so, and also, the interactive part of it too, where you get to like, really use strategy in some of those fights that you have with other people, you know, I think are just really awesome. Which is why I totally like that game,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
more than Civ, I would say.
I mean, the only reason I don't play Age of Wonders more is because it's such a time-consuming game to play. Like, if I had more free time on my hands and like didn't have as much other stuff going on that like necessitated, me to spend time on it, I feel like Age of Wonders is a game that I would play a lot more because it is really a well done, very cool game, for sure.
I mean, that's the only, really, too, that's the only reason why I don't play it more often either, is because I don't have anybody to play with it. But, like, if our other buddy got on more often and was, like, in the mood for something, well, I mean, he's never going to be in for it now because he's going to be obsessed with Civ, but,
Hmm.
if he is ever feeling, a different kind of strategy game, like, I would jump at any bit to play that because I just love that game. I just wish, again, I had somebody to play with.
Hmm. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that brings us to the end of another game of Talisman. Sorry, that was not as interesting as it probably could have been had I not ran away with it. But I probably was due for a win, at least versus you, considering that I think you won the last one we played together.
I think I did.
So I will take that. But yeah, I think we covered a lot of stuff there, and we maybe got off on some weird tangents and stuff, but at least maybe that'll keep it interesting for folks. I'm sure they will let us know whether or not they like our topics and kind of where we're going with stuff. Uh, but hopefully, folks find this enjoyable and continue watching and continue to be into it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't mind this format of talking about games that we like,
Hmm.
rather than like industry stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
down
mean,
with it.
I definitely enjoy talking about games that I enjoy playing because I feel like you kind of even touched on it a little bit earlier. Like one of the big problems with the industry is a lot of times games that are really good don't get the attention they deserve. And I think we both have a tendency to play pretty obscure games in a lot of ways, like games that aren't getting a lot of attention, and I feel like this is a good venue or format or way to kind of highlight those titles. I mean, sure, we just talked about Call of Duty for a bunch on this particular episode, but that doesn't mean that we can't also talk about more obscure indie stuff or even like big publisher stuff that just doesn't get the attention it deserves.
Yeah, yeah. Like again, well, we kind of came to the defense of Advanced Warfare, where it's like we're just telling people who are in that, other gamers that are in that mindset of like, oh well, anything that Activision ever does again is shit because of their practices. And it's like, look, we're not defending their practices at all,
Oh yeah, no, they're
because
total
they're.
scumlords.
Oh
But
yeah, exactly, yeah.
yeah, that
But
game is good though.
exactly, yeah. It's like, but Activision has done more good recently than they have bad with both Destiny and at least Call of Duty Advanced Warfare in
Yeah,
my book.
I mean, I feel like they're definitely on a run. I feel like those two games have definitely been of pretty high quality based on what I've seen and played of them. That those are good examples of taking a lot of money and doing a big budget game and producing a pretty solid product, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap things up and call it a show. So yeah, any last words?
Not really. Just keep gaming, keep on gaming, guys. Keep the medium alive, and we'll see you around soon.
Alrighty. Well, until next time, Talisman.